Welcome to Kick Scammers, the show where we look at the absolute worst Kickstarters, the scummiest Indiegogos and disgraceful GoFundMes ever to exist.
And in today, we understand that there is a lot of big players out there and we respect them tremendously. If we have any advantage at all, it's that we're going to give a more personal feel to our platform. I'm going to be the face like Walt Disney was for his studio.
That was Butch Hartman. Fantastic. Another Kickstarter campaign from another famous Nickelodeon animator. Because the last one went so well, didn't it? So Butch Hartman, the guy behind the movies and TV shows such as Fairly Odd Parents, Danny Phantom and Scooby-Doo Arabian Nights. Yes, it's an odd one to pick, but my sisters and I used to have this on VHS and we watched it a hell of a lot back in the day. Let me know down below if you did too. Hartman, as legendary as this fellow is, does have a few questionable viewpoints, the main one being that it's not the parents' fault as to what their kids watch on TV, it's the suits up top that show your children content and they alone deem appropriate. Thankfully now, that's all gonna change as our saviour Butch Hartman wants to become one of these guys in the suits up top that take things into his own hands, showing your children content that he and he alone deems appropriate. Yes, today guys, it's time to switch off Netflix and try your best to chill, as I, DJ Slope, share with you the first of two rather terrible streaming services made up by you, the backers, both of which have obviously received rather crappy results. And to start us off, we have Butch Hartman's terrible Kickstarter, OAXIS. Welcome to Slope's Game Room.
Hey everybody, the show's on!
Look familiar?
Who are you?
I'm Butch Hartman. I've been in the entertainment industry for over 30 years.
How'd you get in here?
Doggy door. I love entertainment and I'm so excited to give you the opportunity to help me impact culture. Parents, aren't you tired of being constantly terrified that your child is going to see something that they shouldn't? I mean, family time barely exists anymore.
So, basically, what Butch Hartman wants to do is kind of do what's already available. Netflix has a children's section, Disney Plus has parental locks for everything that isn't child-friendly, Amazon Prime does too. Heck, the vast majority of streaming services that offer children's programming offer these sections. And as stated, you can lock off what else is available if you feel the need to. Even my daughter's crappy tablet is locked off and again only features kid content. So what's so different about this particular service? Butch Hartman is the difference. And he even wants you to upload your own content too, by the way. Kinda like YouTube Kids. Although any parents out there that has actually ever used YouTube Kids will probably tell you that, yeah, that particular service might need a bit of an overhaul. Anyway, yes, the nitty-gritty of this whole campaign is the fact that it's a subscription-based streaming service that is 100% safe and for the whole family, and wouldn't just include movie and TV shows, but specifically it would also feature sports, fitness, reality, news, and even video games. Family-friendly news and sports? Who's doctoring what the kids watch now, Butch? The goal of $250,000 was simply the first phase of startup costs, which would include developing the streaming video platform, hiring creative staff and producers to create original content, and acquiring completed projects that fit the family-focused entertainment model. Of course, the campaign hit its goal. 1,290 backers got it up to $268,134, thanks to a rather massive push right at the end of the campaign.
As many of you know, I'm launching a brand new streaming service called OAXIS Entertainment, and we launched a Kickstarter for it 4 weeks ago. Today is the last day you can contribute to the Kickstarter, and we only have hours left. Not days, hours. There's just hours left, and depending on when you watch this, it might be minutes, but we are coming down to the wire. I'm trying to raise $250,000. We are so close to hitting our goal. All I need is 600 people to give me $99, and that's it.
Yes. As stated, he hit his goal with some very questionable bids right at the end of the campaign, but still, he did hit his goal. And the comments were nothing but good. Lots of congratulations from Fairly Odd fans being sold the very vague dream of a brand new streaming service for only $250,000, even though not a single design plan or anything similar was shown for this mammoth project. And those same people actually ended up commenting again more recently, however this time with a slightly different tone. I backed this project near the start of this pledge window. I wish I hadn't at all. Not only did you keep your true intentions for this service a secret, you haven't even been able to show any progress whatsoever. It's been over 2 years, and yes, I'm on the mailing list. No updates whatsoever. Why are you lying about this? What do you have to hide? Because you certainly don't try and hide our traces. Salty, salty, salty. So what exactly happened here? Well, on July 18th, the newly Going It Alone animators campaign was successful, and then nothing. No thanks, no nothing. Well, eventually he did say thanks on social media, but on Kickstarter, again, nothing. The YouTube channel had also had a sort of nothing update too leading up to this point. Seriously, this was just about as vague as the Kickstarter itself, but hey, it doesn't matter, because again, this is the almighty Butch Hartman. He also did a live stream on Kickstarter literally hours before it ended, where he continued to be super vague, dodging questions related to if the network would be LGBTQ friendly. I mean, honestly, at first I wasn't exactly sure the question needed to be asked at all, considering all of the updates on social and in this Kickstarter itself did drive home that same one point, and that was that the service would be for everyone. Still, it was asked, and even though it's an extremely simple question with an even more extremely simple answer, it was asked multiple times, and it was asked in a room with very few people in attendance, and what was alarming was that Butch straight up ignored the question multiple times, which got the skeptics worrying. Now, as confused as you may be about this particular questioning, when you do dig a little deeper, you start to understand why people were so skeptical. Turns out that a video had been discovered online with Butch at a very pro-Christian conference of some kind, where it showed off just how much of a Christian he was. And although I'm pretty sure we can all agree that 99.99999% recurring of all Christians are good, honest people, no different than the majority of other people who have nothing against the LGBTQ community, the dodging of this very simple question, along with this very heavy Christian-based conference footage, gave the skeptics plenty more fuel for the fire. Now, as a content creator, this is normally the part of the video where I would come at you and say that I have a trans friend, a gay friend, a black friend, a religious friend, whatever friend I need to have to justify to you guys that I see people equally. But let's get real. You don't need proof of that from me. We all have friends that live differently than you and me. It's meaningless, especially from some guy on a screen on your phone that you're watching while sitting on the bog. It doesn't matter who your friends or my friends are, as long as we all treat people equally and we respect one another's way of life, then in my eyes, that's all it takes. And sure, yes, he is a Christian, and yes, a very small minority of this and many other religious and non-religious people unfortunately think the opposite way. There's no reason to jump to these conclusions. In my personal opinion, the only problem I have is when a particular belief system, obviously I'm talking about religion here, is forced onto someone that doesn't share that same belief. Talking about it is absolutely fine. Respecting one another should always be encouraged. However, forcing or worse, tricking people into religion is not. Which is why if I was a backer to what looked like an albeit very flawed but financially successful family-only streaming service, I would have been pretty wound up when in this particular conference he thanks God and claims to have been given an assignment to make this streaming service not only family-friendly, but to also, and I quote, shift the narrative in Hollywood, save cultures, save lives, and although he claims this will not be a Christian network, he will release a channel that will have these qualities and will reach the entire other side of the spectrum. And finally, he also states that since he got the ball rolling on this entire project, the whole thing has moved forward so fast and so quick, simply because he gave it all to him, aka he gave it all to God. In many people's eyes, this now deleted conference footage was proof enough to show that this streaming service was going to be a heavily Christian-based streaming service rather than anything else, and there was nothing anywhere in this campaign's entire life that said that. Well, not up until the very last few hours of the campaign. This was when that Twitter thank you note came into play. Butch just found himself in a tough spot. Not only did he have to double down on the fact that no, this was not a Christian service, but at the same time, he had to please his Christian supporters who had also rallied together to support this service. Look, I get it. This particular video isn't exactly as cut and dry as my other kick scammer videos, and hey, you may think differently, but please do hold judgment, because it gets a whole lot worse. During this conference, Butch goes on to explain that even though places like Netflix have kids sections, they don't have family sections, and as a result, they no longer sit around together watching films. It just wasn't like that back in his day. He knows kids that have committed suicide, and this kind of thing was just a lot less frequent back in his day, and the reason for this is influence. We are apparently influenced by what we see online or on TV, and this is one of the reasons that people commit suicide. Now this is where people started to get a little bit more upset. The incredibly vague project had nothing going for it when it launched, well, nothing besides the one and only Butch Hartman himself. A name we love, a name we respect, and a name that got a project that we know almost nothing about past its $250,000 goal. And because it was so vague, backers had no choice but to fill in the blanks themselves. And let me just make this abundantly clear here, and to make sure people do not see this as a way of labeling all religious or more specifically Christian people the same way, it is also worth noting that when Butch mentions the 7 mountains of influence in this conference, what he's actually talking about is the hardcore Christian belief that Jesus will not return until Christianity consumes all aspects of our lives. Those being media, government, education, economy, family, religion, and celebration. Hence why OAXIS wasn't marketed directly for Christians, but for everyone, with again, absolutely no mention of Christianity anywhere on the page. You see the problem? Every time someone questioned Butch about all of this, the response was nothing. Or worse, it was completely ignored. There was no public game plan that you would expect from a project like this. There was no evidence that he could actually even do any of it either. There was no idea given as to what shows would be on the service. There was nothing. Nothing but Butch Hartman telling you that it'll all be okay, and some very late in the campaign's life discovered footage that gave off the impression that the streaming service was going to be a Christian-focused service designed to be viewed by people on the other side of the spectrum. And that is why this particular project received an almost complete U-turn of support from the backers once it was too late and after the money had been raised. On top of this, Butch's reputation had been on a bit of a downward spiral for a short while, and unless you followed him closely, you may not have known that. Unfortunately for him, when you are semi-famous and you run a not necessarily overly successful campaign, but an extremely newsworthy one, people will indeed talk. They will spread the news on every little thing that you say and do, and more importantly, take notice of you and your rather strange behaviours a tad more. Here are just a few more examples of the now very controversial Butch Hartman. Calling non-creative people out and refusing to listen to them.
You know what's funny? Wait, I want to say one more thing. You know, as many things I've done in my life, like being a father, being a husband, being a guy who's in his 50s who's done, or a boss, a guy who's done shows, a guy who's stayed up late at night working really hard, to answer questions from people who've never done anything and they want to criticize, it makes me laugh. It makes me laugh. It's like, really? That's your question? So it's quite amusing, actually.
Calling introverts selfish.
People that are introverts, I want to encourage you all, don't be an introvert. Because being an introvert is, and a lot of people, I'm probably going to get a lot of flack over saying this. If you're an introvert, it's a very selfish thing to be, and here's why. Because it's all about you. You're self-centered. You don't want to get out of yourself and go like, well, maybe I could communicate with these people. Well, I'm just an introvert. I'm going to sit over here. People have to figure out what I'm thinking. Because you're making everybody else uncomfortable when you're an introvert like that. Because no one knows what you're thinking, no one knows how you're feeling, and no one knows what to communicate with you. If you're going to be a showrunner or a leader in any way, you're going to have to be a communicator.
How about jokingly blaming the death of a famous voice actress on another famous voice actress?
But Tara was not the original Timmy Turner. The original actress was Mary Kay Bergman, who sadly passed away. But she was
such a sweet, sweet lady.
Sweet lady. She also did a bunch of voices on South Park when that first started.
Yeah.
She was the mom on South Park.
No, she had a very prolific career. She was awesome.
Doing great. And then she ended up passing away. And I think Tara actually had something to do with that. And so that was probably your fault. No, I'm kidding.
Sorry guys, I had to actually use this overused edited clip for this segment, as the original upload has had this part edited out. As has a whole heap of his social media posts on places like Twitter, because by this point, the hate was real. Anyway, moving on. He hired a young animator by the name of Kuro to create the short anime-like parody version of one of his shows, most likely due to the SpongeBob videos of the same nature doing so well. And then he out of nowhere terminated the project without paying the animator, even though it was agreed in contract that he would get paid the full amount regardless of how far along he was. All communication stopped between the two, who had worked together for the last 4 years up to this point, and the shared Google Drive full of all the contracted files was deleted. Eventually, with the internet blowing up on everything Butch did from this point, the amount was eventually, and no doubt reluctantly, paid. Ah yes, the plagiarism artwork stuffs, in case you didn't know. If you like a certain artist's style, you can, in some cases, pay them a set fee to draw you whatever you want, in their own style or whatever style you both agree on, and Butch was no different. Pay him $200, say you like that lass from Attack on Titan, and boom, here it is, a completely unoriginal piece of work practically traced, aka stolen, by another artist. Boy, oh boy, do you not want to be winding up the art commission community. Out of everything he's ever done, if you went back and looked at the backlash during that same time period on Twitter, you would think he just started World War III. Artists, rightfully so, kick up such a massive fuss and then some when stuff like this goes down, and boy oh boy did this help blow up his popularity even more. All in the wrong ways, of course. After all, he was an animator himself, a successful animator that had inspired thousands, possibly millions of artists, and now he's getting paid a measly $200 and copying their work to bring home that bacon. You know, all of those channels that have like hand-drawn little characters with lots of different expressions that they use to kick off about whatever story is blowing up that week? I think they all got him for this one. And it doesn't end there. You got the multiple occasions where he downplayed mental issues, illnesses, and even as stated, suicide as something that was primarily controlled by the content that they consume, which of course was the reason his OAXIS platform was so great. in his eyes. Before continuing on, if you have any of these involuntary traits like being an introvert or on the more hardcore side of the scale, someone who is suicidal, don't take the Butch Hartman advice and just get over it or pray. Heck, still not working, pray a little harder. Because studies show that that is not going to work. All I really want to say on this matter from my own personal views, that being someone who has, touch wood, never had to deal with these issues personally, so take it with a grain of salt, just being honest here, is that I at least understand that he thinks he's doing the right thing. But it's been proven time and time again that the bottle it up or wish for it to go away method is just not the right way to go. Now again, I'm just as qualified to be talking about this as Butch himself, so take what I say with a grain of salt as stated. But yeah, guys, from what I've seen in the real world and from the people out there that have actually reached out to me and thanked me for creating content that maybe have helped them through a tough time in their lives, do not bottle it up. Reach out and speak to someone if you can. It's a great first step. You may think you're alone, but you're not. And hey, if you don't want to take a couple of unqualified people's opinions on the matter, like Butch and me, there are many much more qualified people out there that are happy to talk to you in confidence, and I will try my best to leave a few links down below if you do need them. My advice is again not to listen to Butch if you suffer from any of the previously mentioned symptoms, and especially do not listen to him if you have autism. Now, in all fairness, this is more Butch's wife Julian's hardcore beliefs, as she is a founder of the Healing Founders Conference that claims prayers and hardcore beliefs of faith can cure you of autism. The same Julian whose name is signed at the end of the vast majority of updates on this particular campaign, I might add. The same Julian who decides to remedy her symptoms by researching them online, and she doesn't trust doctors and never takes any medicine whatsoever, even though she has actually claimed to have also spent $300,000 on the stuff. It's all very odd, and dare I say it, the Bethel Church, which is a group of heavy-handed Christians that believes in these slightly more hardcore beliefs, feels a little bit cult-like. If I was going to be going deeper with this religious group, it would get a little OTT, and again, I'm happy for you to choose to believe whatever you believe as long as it's respectful and not forceful onto other people, and this is where our story all links together. Remember when I said I didn't quite understand the reasoning as to why that backer asked if the upcoming OAXIS service would feature LGBTQ content or would be LGBTQ friendly, and why the Hartmans seemed to dodge that question? It finally makes sense when you find out that the leader of the Bethel Church was urging his followers to email or call the legislators who were responsible in deciding if conversion therapy should become illegal, and I'll let you guys guess what stance he was suggesting they take. Now, of course, yet again, we can only assume that the Hartmans felt the same way, but considering there is proof that they are so heavily ingrained into this part of the church and they actively dodged the questioning, yeah, I actually do think it's a fair assumption to make. Whew. So, with all of that out of the way, what has actually happened to the OAXIS service? A whole lot of nothing. Well, on the Kickstarter itself at least. If you want updates, you needed to sign up to a mailing list, which according to the commenters, has never had an update sent out. Thankfully, over the years, fans and of course critics have been keeping an eye on all of this unfold, and between them have discovered that the now missing website OAXIS.tv, which was full of obviously stolen artwork, giving off the impression that OAXIS has the rights to shows and movies such as Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Star Wars movies too, which although I don't have proof of, I'm pretty sure that it doesn't. It also stated that the $250,000 raised is nowhere near enough to even make the website, and that it will need to stop the build whilst it raises more funds, and yes, seriously, that's it. A few YouTubers managed to actually get into what was obviously the placeholder of this streaming service would look like, which was completely broken, completely full of copyrighted or simply his own YouTube video thumbnails, which of course didn't work, and absolutely nothing else. This was what $268,134 got you. Now, in Butch's ideal world, I'm sure he thinks, or should I say he has faith, that the money can be raised. But considering OAXIS TV now just directs you to his own website, and of course he has pretty much intoxicated the vast majority of his own fan base, my guess is he's never going to be able to pull it off. And yes, if you are talking about streaming services that are never going to make it and are built on a bed of lies, the exact same can indeed be said for AnimeTube. But that's a story for another time. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.